All right, welcome everyone. I'm doing something a little bit different, so let me know how you feel about this. If you like these kind of presentation style a little bit more, because I know that as of right now, the game design team isn't able to meet up as often, and everyone's kind of gone their own directions for a little while. But we will be coming together, and once we do, we'll start doing these presentations as a group again. But in the meanwhile, I thought I would go through some game design talks and go over some topics that have been on my mind for the past little while. So this week, I'm gonna start with what I've learned about designing the affiliations, my journey through that experience. Okay, let me turn down some background music. And kind of how we've got to where we are and where we're planning to go next. So thank you everyone who's joining. If you get an opportunity, please share this with your social group, anyone who you think would be interested in joining us today, because I'll do some Q&A at the end if there are some questions, and if there aren't, then this will just be a video that we can come back and reference in the future to talk about where we're at. Before I get into the main topic, let me just jump into here. So thank you to our Patreon supporters. Special shout out to Andrew, Gunther, Hill, Steven, Stevo, and Will. Thank you to everyone who's helped us get this far in the project. It's been a lot of support across the board, and I'm really, really grateful for everything. We've had a lot of great wins in the past little while, so I'm excited to share those when they become when I can actually start sharing them. But until then, know that next month's Patreon promo is going to be that dedicated studies, which looks super cool. I mean, a lot of these alpha beta cards never got the full art experience, so I'm happy to be able to share this one. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Alex, for joining us. All right, and also Future League. So huge shout out. Thank you for all the support to all the Future Leaguers. You've been able to help us do so much with the game moving forward. You have no idea. So I just want to give a huge thank you to everyone. So today at 7 p.m. We're going to be on Tabletop Simulator playing some games. So if you're available, please join us. Join the Discord to be part of that conversation. Our next Future League tournament is happening actually tomorrow. So if you haven't signed up yet, please do. It's a free to enter. Everyone's going to be getting that promo malfeasance. By special request, I will be giving one random person the misprint malfeasance because people want that. So that will be happening. But other than that, everyone will be getting that malfeasance. And our next town hall will be happening on March 1st. I'm going to push that up to 6 o'clock if that works for everyone. Because 5 o'clock, I know that's right after work's done. If I give it till 6 o'clock, I'd like to see if more people are able to join and how that feels. All right, so let's jump into this topic. First, I want to start with why did we make affiliations? Why did we even go down this pathway of creating any affiliations or this concept of dividing the cards? And this really came down to Mark Rosewater, who's a very famous lead designer of Magic the Gathering. He has this quote of restriction breeds creativity. I don't know if those are his exact words. I'm pretty sure they are, but I love that concept. I love this idea of if we gave players all the cards at their disposal, they'll make the best deck. But if you start limiting some of their options, it forces them to think in very creative ways to how to optimize themselves. If they don't have access to everything, how do they make it that they are in control of what they do and become as powerful as they need to? Excuse me. So the big thing was I originally, when I started designing, my first game that I made only had two affiliations at the time, light and dark. And because of that, there was only one really good option of things to play because dark had all the offensive stuff, light has all the defensive stuff. We know defensive stuff doesn't work very well in these type of games. And so everyone just played dark, and it was just this onslaught of a game, which was cool. But eventually we streamlined it, and people were just playing the same decks. There weren't as much variety. And then I started going down the rabbit hole of fire, earth, water, and earth, air, water, fire. Yeah. But the problem with that is there was connotations that came behind those. So I needed something that was abstract, something that people didn't come in there with any uh, preconceived notions of how the colors or the affiliations or anything worked. but I messed up a little bit there. There are some attachments to some things, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So I needed something that was abstract. The next thing I needed was something that could exist going from world to world. Because some ideas that I had, I can't recall them off the top of my head, but they would make sense within one fantasy story arc. But when we went from one story arc to another story arc, the those concepts would not apply moving forward. Uh, and we needed to remove a lot of preconceived notions to give us as designers the opportunity to do things that were unique, that were different, that were going down different paths in different ways. So originally, the affiliations weren't colored; they were going to be just white symbols. But that got changed when people started confusing them and couldn't associate things together. So I decided it would be better to start color coding them. And that, so before I jump into what we've learned, some of the mistakes we made and some of the lessons learned, I thought very quickly, in case there are people who are watching this and in the future or even now who don't know what the five affiliations are, the Bellum, Thymos, Axon, Phage, and Chaos. So they're on the right side of the screen here. Bellum, the top one, represents order. It's order, structure, and this idea of discipline. Thymos being the second one, which is supposed to represent emotion. The third one being Axon. This is about control and knowledge. Phage is about survivability, and Chaos is about power. Where did these five come from? Well, they're based off of five attributes of the brain. So Bellum, looking at the cerebellum, which is about, it controls a lot more about your fine motor skills, but it is the thing that uh, balances yourself in the world and allows you to create spatial movement, spatial orientation. Sorry, I got distracted by the chats there. So yeah, Jason, I am by myself today. For the next little while, I think I'll be by myself. A lot of the game designers need to take a little bit of a break from the project, as COVID is causing a lot of interruptions in people's lives. So we'll be coming back as a team, hopefully in a few months. But in the meanwhile, I'm going to go through these kind of more lecture series about game design and what I've learned making Genesis, because I feel like I've been working on this project long enough that I don't know if I'm qualified on a higher end. I wouldn't say I'm like a pro at this, but I am confident in my skills that I think I have some lessons I can teach people. So that's why I'm going through this more of a lecture series. And going back to them, so thymos, hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is one of the four parts of your brain that deal with emotional control. So that's where the thymos came from. Axons are the neural pathways that connect all, like that send the neurons in your brain, which processes knowledge. It's the communication highway, basically, of your brain. Phage comes from bacteriophage. There are actually things that are in your body that are aggressive. They do attack, but they attack primarily bad bacteria in your body. So they are more of a defensive mechanism. And chaos was really cool because this was this idea of um, the state of your brain, the state of your essence. Because even under all the chaoticness of the way your brain works, it's actually very organized. Like it's hard to be both insanely chaotic, but yet function the way it does. Like for us to do the things we do, it's really amazing. So that's where the five symbols kind of came from. Uh, Originally, Bellum was supposed to be called Judgment, and one of my friends was like, "No, that doesn't really work because all of these have these cool monosyllabic names to them," and he got Judgment that really stood out. So that got changed from Judgment down to Bellum. All right. So what has worked for us so far? Some of the biggest aspects about making the affiliations that's been really cool is uh, it worked a lot on the flavor of the game. It ended up creating really two-dimensional champions. Because when I look at someone like Nubia, she has very much that balance between Bellum of order, structure, and uh, just the belief in herself, and Axon, this desire for knowledge and for control over her destiny. And she represents these two very beautifully. And that's why when we get into characters like Kendra, who are Axon Chaos, even her and Nubia have something in common. They both are desiring knowledge, but the way they use that knowledge is very different. And these multi-dimensional champions really brings life to the game. Um, I don't know how much the players feel it, but I know some people who I've talked to and who really get into understanding the characters. There's a love for these characters, and I think that's because they aren't one dimensional. They're not purely after knowledge or purely after balance or purely after emotional satisfaction. They are complex characters, and a lot of that has to come from their affiliations. But not only are the champions like that, the tribes in the world are like that. You can see when you look at Fish Should, which is all primitive warriors, hunters, gatherers, they very much adhere to Thymos and Chaos. All of them, and the buildings adhere to this. The way of life adheres to this. And then when we go to Vadhis, and you get Bellum, Axon, and they go from tents and hunting and gathering to agriculture and stone buildings and weapons and armies. It's very much the affiliations that are coming in play here. So it created a very, very rich tribes, which created a really, really rich political landscape of the world and allowed these wars to make sense as they're going from city to city. It's not that things are just randomly happening. They unfold because of their belief structures, of their philosophies, of who they are as people. And I think that really, really helped us when designing the game, making it feel alive and making it feel rich. The affiliations helped a lot. But where did they fail us? Well, one thing was we couldn't borrow off of learned experience, and we tried so much. So when we started color coding the affiliations, no matter how hard we tried, there were 5 affiliations. Some of those colors mirrored magic, and instantly people are drawing one-to-one relationships between Genesis and magic. And they're expecting Bellum to act like white. They're expecting Axon to act like blue. And part of that is my fault, for sure. A lot of it was some of the things that Axon does is very much like blue and magic. You're going to find those similarities, so you expect that this mirror or this that consistency to follow all the way through, but it doesn't. And at some point, it starts deviating in Genesis. And the moment it does, it creates an uneasiness in the players. And there's been a lot of tension, I know, with my players, with the communities, with the designers, because things don't work the way you want them to work sometimes. And breaking outside of that mold is very difficult. So that was definitely one part where we failed. I think if I were to redo it, I would change the coloring system. I would also reevaluate if Axon is representing knowledge. Like, we chose the colors for a reason. I have a book, and I would go grab it, but I'm doing this as a live stream. I can't really pause things. But there was a book I own that's about symbology, and they go through the symbology of all the colors, and that's why we chose the colors we did, because the colors, what they represent in different mythologies is what we wanted them to represent in this world. Uh, so there were some things that it ended up hurting us in the long run, that we made the decisions we did, because now players are coming in with preconceived notions, and that was one of the things we were trying to avoid from the get-go. So that's one place where we failed. Another thing was we couldn't niche them too much. The more we tried to make it that only one affiliation had a particular mechanic, the more it backfired on us. The more players were like, we want to see this mechanic in more affiliations, or it's really frustrating that I'm playing this champion and I don't have access to that mechanic. Draw is a very important one, and that's one of the things that's backfired on us a lot. So the more we niche them, there became this challenge of like, how do we find balance in everything? And that really comes to my last point, is that the affiliations have been really, really difficult to balance. Part of that has been inexperience on our end. And as the game grows and evolves, we'll learn how to create and make them better, and how to move forward with them in such a way that they become uh, a lot more unique and a lot more balanced. But I think for where we're at right now, this has been one of the biggest steps on our end that have been a bit of a mistake. Um, so one thing I was looking at when I was making the slide, one of the things we learned as we kind of grew up, and especially now, I started realizing that the affiliations, what are they at the end of the day? Well, they're not personality types. I tried to niche them into like the Myers-Briggs or some of the other personality systems, and it didn't work that way. And then I was like, are they grouping of mechanics? Well, no, they're more than just grouping of mechanics. And I was trying to figure out how do they kind of connect with all of them connect together. And at the end of the day, I realized that they are philosophies. Philosophy, the study of general and fundamental questions. Each affiliation at the end of the day is trying to answer particular questions and trying to figure out who they are. It's a belief system. And a champion is then, well, a bi affiliated champion is a champion that is dealing with these two belief systems, these two philosophies. And at times they overlap and at times they contradict each other. So we one thing I've started doing is looking at different philosophical questions. Things like, does this affiliation value the group over the self? Or does this affiliation believe that there's a higher power? Or are the atheists believing that there is no higher power, or that there is a higher power, but it's irrelevant in the world? And what is the belief? What is their answers to these particular questions? And then once you start getting these answers to particular questions, you see where the overlaps are in these affiliations, and that's where the richness and the um, kind of the two-dimensional nature of these characters start existing. So if I would look at, let's just say myself, like there are certain questions where I have a really strong answer one way or the other. Do I believe in a higher power? Yes, I do believe in God and the whole entire Islamic structure of how the world was created and our higher beings. But do I have a direct answer of the group versus the self? No, it's situational. There are times where I will choose the group over myself. There are times where I'll choose myself over the group. It depends from moment to moment. So because I have that internal struggle in myself and I have to make those decisions, I'm not one dimensional. I do create variables in the scenarios. And I think that's very important when we look at combining two affiliations together to make a champion. But it also means that when it comes to mechanics, these mechanics can be tied to particular questions. And the answers to those questions can say, would this affiliation use that mechanic or not? Um, so that leads us into what we're doing as our next steps. We're always learning. We're trying to get better at this. I'm I do not believe we'll be able to come to a solid answer to what the affiliations are, how they work, and get them to a point where they are concrete or that there's a baseline structure to all of them. It's going to take a few years because it, we're not releasing sets as often as we could, so we don't get a lot of opportunity to explore them as much. Now, the future leaguers, you've helped us a lot in answering a lot of those questions and having to justify why we're doing them. But once we start understanding the affiliations more, I want it to be the other way around. I don't want to take a mechanic and give it to affiliation because I want that affiliation to have it. I want it to be the other way around. I want the affiliation to tell us from their philosophies, from their beliefs, would they use this mechanic? Does it seem like something they would actually use? And if it does, then it's very important to us to put that mechanic there. So the better we understand the affiliations, the better we understand the abilities and mechanics that go into it, the offensive and defensive tactics of that affiliation, the tempo of that affiliation, and what their goals are. How would they actually try to win in combat? So this is an ongoing conversation that I'm having in my head, and I do sit down and talk to different players, different designers, and try to figure out the niche space of it all. All right, so and then I wanted to kind of end off on this quote, and I really love this. It's from Ender's Game. In the moment when I truly understand my enemies, understand him well enough to defeat him, then in that very moment I also love him. I think it's impossible to really understand somebody, what they want, what they believe, and not love them the way they love themselves. And I'm starting to understand that better and better as I work with affiliations. The more I work with them and I understand what they like, what they dislike, where they fall under particular philosophies, under particular structures, under political conversations, the more I start to enjoy them, and the more I love them, and the more I'm like, I want to play this affiliation. When I started making this game, Thymos was not my favorite affiliation. I did not enjoy playing Thymos at all. I thought it was very boring and very reckless. But the more I understood what it was trying to solve, what it was trying to answer, the more I started enjoying it more. And I'm sure it's the same way with a lot of these other games that create these philosophical um, entities in their own space. So I just thought this was a beautiful quote, and it really summed up my feelings of my journey with the affiliation so far. I got some closing remarks. Before I get into those, I'm going to take a look at the chat and see what's been coming in. So Alex, having 10 decks ready. Yeah, I need to make some decks, so I'll be spending some time a little bit later today before 7 o'clock to sit down and make a bunch of decks. So I'm looking forward to really playtest a lot of those. Um, okay, so it does hurt that there isn't an easy way for me to look up ability distribution across colors in Genesis. Um, I think so. I don't disagree, and I think that it is difficult from the player's perspective. But on the other hand, there has to be some things that we don't reveal, and part of it is because we're still designing those things and we're still trying to understand them. So I think part of it is you got to be able to trust us as the design team to make some of those decisions and go forward with them. Um, and then regarding draw, Magic is realizing at this moment that draw is too fundamental a concept to close off from factions, and a lot of work is going into giving each Magic color some version of draw. Yes, and we're looking at that too. I At the end of the day, what I'm learning a lot more is that just because certain things work for other games doesn't necessarily mean it's true in ours. We have to figure out what truly works for ours, because there are things that are very unique about Genesis, and uh, not everything holds true. I think there are a lot of things that Magic does that's brilliant. There are a lot of things that Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon or even Vanguard or Flesh and Blood, Wise Schwartz, all these games. There are a lot of things they do that are brilliant, but there are also things that are in games like Warhammer or Age of Sigmar. That's another Warhammer. Sorry, what's the one I'm thinking of? Bolt Action. That's the other one. That they do that may help us in understanding attributes to our game better. One thing I like looking at is the fact that games are living organisms, and they evolve and they grow according to what they want. And the more, as designers, we try to shoehold them into working a particular way, the more it will work against us and end up hurting the overall design of the game. So I I know that draw is very important. There's a lot of mechanics that are very important, and trying to find a good way to balance them throughout the game is going to be an essential attribute to the way we move forward. All right, so just some closing remarks here. The next chapter for the Akasha Codex, Chapter 7, Quick Shots, should be releasing on February 22nd. I'm really excited about this one. I've been having a lot of fun working with Carl and Brad to put together some amazing chapters. Carl's been doing all the writing, Brad's been doing all the editing. I'm just doing some of the skeleton work. Like, they are really the bulk of the work. So, huge shout out to them for being such an amazing team, working together to produce amazing literature. So if you haven't had a chance to read through the Akasha Codex, please check it out on the website. Exploring the Libraries happens Tuesday at 7 p.m. That's a show where Alex Miller and I sit down and we talk about particular topics in Genesis. Uh, Last week we went through all of Ray's and kind of talked about the high points of the set, the low points of the set, and things in between. And that was a lot of fun, and it was a very eye-opening moment for me. Tomorrow there is a tournament happening. If you are part of Future League, or if you just want to play a couple games of Genesis, please come and participate. And we'll have prizes for everyone who shows up. On top of that, if you're not able to participate, feel free to come and watch the live stream. We'll be up here on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch every week. Every tournament. So, um, COVID reminder. I know that things are starting to open up in Ontario, and different states and provinces are doing things in different ways. Be careful out there. Just adhere to whatever your guidelines are. Don't get yourself in trouble. Don't be reckless. And remember that these store owners, they're frontline defense, like they're the frontline workers in our industry. And the last thing we want is for them to have to close up because of a preventable spread within their space. So please be kind, please be considerate. If you're feeling sick in any way whatsoever, don't go and visit these stores. Don't go and put other people at risk. Town Hall is happening on March 1st at 6 p.m. If you're free and available, please come join us. We'll be talking about, I'll be throwing out questions out there for the community to help me understand their perspective on the game a lot more. We've done that for the past two town halls, and they've been a lot of fun. So please join us for that. That'll be a lot, really great. And then tonight is on Tabletop Simulator. We are playing some games. So Alex has mentioned he has a bunch of decks. I'll be building some decks. So come join us. And that's everything for this week. If you have any questions, feel free to message them to me or send them to me one way or another. I'd love to have these conversations. Or if you want to have an actual conversation, feel free to reach out to me, book some time, and we'll have a chat over the phone or over Discord or whatever. And try to understand these things a little bit better. Thank you for joining me. Let me know if you like this structure, if you like this kind of more seminar lecture format. If you do, I'll do more of them. If you don't, I may still do some more of them, but I'll keep that in mind as I go forward with other ones and try to change the topic, change the tone a little bit more. Thank you, everyone, and I'll see you next week. Bye.